You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you. 86. Wood Mother, lending power, conquers the fiendish creature. Metal Squire, using his magic, extirpates the deviates. We were telling you about the great sage Sun who, as he led the horse and toted the luggage, was searching and calling for his master all over the summit. It was then that he saw Zhu 8 Rules run up to him, panting hard and saying, "Elder brother, why are you hollering?" "Master has disappeared," replied Pilgrim. "Have you seen him?" "Originally," said 8 Rules, "I followed the Tang monk to be a priest. But you have to make fun of me again, telling me to play the general. I took enormous risk to fight with that monster spirit for quite some time before I came back here with my life. You and Sha Monk, however, were supposed to be guarding Master. How is it that you're asking me instead?" Pilgrim said, "Brother, I'm not blaming you. Perhaps you were a little dazed and didn't realize that you had allowed the monster spirit to slip back here to seize Master. I went to strike at the monster spirit, relying on Sha Monk to guard Master. Now even Sha Monk has disappeared." "Sha Monk," said 8 Rules with a giggle, "must have taken Master somewhere to drop his load." Hardly had he finished speaking when Sha Monk appeared. "Sha Monk," asked Pilgrim, "where has Master gone?" "Both of you must have been seeing double," said Sha Monk, "and that's why you allowed the monster spirit to slip back here to try to seize Master. Old San took off to fight with him, but Master should be sitting by himself on the horse." All at once Pilgrim became so enraged that he jumped up and down as he cried, "We've fallen for their plan. We've fallen for their plan." "What sort of a plan?" asked Sha Monk. "This," replied Pilgrim, "is called the plan of plum blossoms with parted petals, which they used to split us brothers apart before they dashed right into our midst to haul Master away. Heavens! 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 What shall we do?" As he spoke, he could hardly hold back the tears rolling down his cheeks. "Don't cry," said 8 Rules. "Once you cry, you turn into a namby-pamby. He can't be very far, for he has to be somewhere in this mountain. Let's go search for him." With no better alternative, the 3 of them had to enter the mountain to begin their search. After they had journeyed some 20 miles, they reached a cave dwelling beneath a hanging cliff, with steep summits half appearing, and strange rocks so rugged, rare blossoms and plants most fragrant, red apricots, green peaches most luscious. The old tree before the ledge. Its skin, 40 spans, is frost white and rain resistant. The hoary pine beyond the door. Its jade green hues rise skyward 2,000 feet. Wild cranes in pairs come oft before the cave to dance in the breeze. Mountain fowl in twos would perch on the boughs to sing in the sun. Clusters of yellow vines like hanging ropes. Rows of misty willows like dripping gold. A square pond storing up water. A deep cave close to the mountain. A square pond storing up water. Conceals an aged dragon which has yet to change. In a deep cave close to the mountain lives one man-eating old fiend of many years. In truth no less than an immortal's lair. This place that gathers in the wind and air. On seeing the cave dwelling, Pilgrim in 2 or 3 steps bounded right up to the door to examine it more closely. The stone door was tightly closed, but across the top of the door was a slab of stone bearing this inscription in large letters: "The mist-concealing mountain, the broken peak, joined ring cave." 8 Rules, said Pilgrim, "Let's move. This is where the monster spirit lives, and Master has to be in the house." Strengthened by the presence of his companions, our idiot unleashed his violence and delivered as hard a blow as he could on the stone door, making a huge, gaping hole in it. "Fiend," he cried, "send my master out quickly, lest this muckrake tear down the door and finish off your entire household." Those little monsters guarding the door hurried inside to report, "Great King, we've brought on a disaster." What disaster? Asked the old fiend. Someone has broken through our front door, replied one of the little monsters, yelling for his master. Astounded, the old fiend said, I wonder whoever could have found his way here. Don't be afraid, said the vanguard. Let me go out and have a look. This little fiend dashed up to the front door and stuck his head out sideways through the hole to look around. When he saw the huge snout and large ears, he at once turned back and called out, Great King, don't be afraid of him. This is Ju 8 Rules, who has not much ability and won't dare be unruly. If he does, we'll open our door and take him in here to be prepared and steamed. The only person we need fear is the monk with a hairy face and a thunder god beak. When he heard this through the door, 8 Rules said, Oh elder brother. He's not afraid of me but only of you. Master has to be in his house. You go forward quickly. Lawless cursed beast, shouted Pilgrim. Your grandpa's son is here. Send out my master and I'll spare your life. Great King, said the vanguard, it's bad. Pilgrim's son has found his way here. The old fiend began to reprehend him, saying, It's all because of that so-called parted petals plan of yours that disaster has descended on our door. How will this end? Please relax, Great King, said the vanguard, and don't find fault with me. I recall that Pilgrim's son happens to be a kind and forbearing ape. Though he may possess vast magic powers, he also loves flattery. Let us take out a fake human head to deceive him a little, and flatter him a little too, with a few words. Just tell him that we have devoured his master. If we can deceive him, the Tang monk will be ours for enjoyment. If we can't, we'll try something else. Where shall we find a fake human head? Asked the old fiend. The vanguard said, Let's see if I could make one. Marvelous fiend. Using a steel axe, he cut off a lump of willow root, shaped it into a skull, and threw some human blood on it. In this gory fashion the head was taken out to the door on a lacquered tray by a small fiend, who called out, Holy Father Great Sage, please calm your anger, and allow me to report to you. Pilgrim's son was indeed susceptible to flattery. When he heard the Holy Father Great Sage, he stopped 8 Rules, saying, Let's not move yet and see what they have to say. After your master had been taken into the cave by our great king, said the little fiend holding the tray, those uncouth young fiends of ours did not know any better than to try to swallow him at once. Some tore at him, while others gnawed at him. Your master was thus devoured, and all we have left here is his head. It's all right if he's been devoured, said Pilgrim, but show me the head, and let me see if it's real. The little fiend threw out the head through the hole in the door. The moment Ju 8 Rules saw it, he began to weep, saying, How pitiful. We had one kind of master entering through this door, but now we have this kind of master coming out. Idiot, said Pilgrim, why don't you try to determine whether this is a real human head before you start weeping? Aren't you ashamed of yourself, said 8 Rules. Could there be a false human head? This happens to be a false one, replied Pilgrim. How can you tell? Asked 8 Rules. If you threw down a real human head, said Pilgrim, it would fall on the ground with a dull thud, whereas a false head would make a loud rattle. If you don't believe me, let me throw it down for you to hear. He took it up and hurled it against a boulder, and it produced a loud clang. Elder brother, said Shaw Monk, it rattles, all right. If it rattles, said Pilgrim, it's a false one. Let me bring out its true form. Whipping out his golden hooped rod, he cracked it open with one blow. 8 Rules looked more closely and discovered that it was only a lump of willow root. Unable to contain himself, 8 Rules began to utter a string of abuses, crying, You bunch of hairy clods. You have already hidden my master in the cave, and yet you dare use a lump of willow root to deceive your ancestor hog. Could my master have been a willow spirit? The little fiend who held the tray was so horrified that he shook all over as he ran back to report, hard. 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 Why so many hards? Asked the old fiend. The little fiend said, both Ju 8 Rules and Shaw Monk were deceived, but Pilgrim's son happens to be an antique dealer who knows his stuff. He recognized the fact that it was a false human head. If you could find a real head for him, you might be able to send him away. Where could I find one? Said the old fiend. Ah, I know. In our skinning pavilion we still have several human heads that haven't been eaten yet. Go pick one out for us. A few of the fiends went immediately to the pavilion and selected a fresh head, which they then gnawed at until it was slick and smooth. The little fiend carried it out to the front again on a tray, crying, "Holy Father, great sage, the previous one was indeed a false head. This one, however, is the true head of Father Tang. Our great king has kept it as a talisman for the house, but we're presenting it to you now." With a thud, the head was thrown out through the hole in the door, and it rolled all over, still dripping blood. When Pilgrim's son saw that it was a real human head, he had no choice but to weep. 8 Rules and Sha Monk, too, joined in the loud wailing. As he tried to hold back his tears, 8 Rules said, "Elder brother, let's not cry just yet. The weather isn't so good right now, and I fear that it may stink. Let me take it somewhere to have it buried while it's still fresh. Then we can cry some more." "You're quite right," replied Pilgrim. Not revolted, our idiot hugged the head to his bosom and ran up the mountain ledge. Having found a spot facing the sun where the wind and air would be collected, he used his rake to dig a hole to try to bury the head. Then he built a grave mound and called out to Sha Monk, "You and elder brother can stay here and weep. Let me go find something to use for offering." Going over to the side of the brook, he selected several large twigs of willow and picked up some egg-shaped pebbles, which he brought back to the graveside. The willow twigs were planted on both sides, and the pebbles were placed in a pile in front. "What do you mean by this?" asked Pilgrim. "We can pretend that these twigs are pines and cypresses," replied 8 Rules, "so that master will have a bit of shade on top. The pebbles may be taken as pastries, so that master will enjoy a small offering." "Coolly," snapped Pilgrim. "The man's dead. And you still want to offer him pebbles?" 8 Rules said. "Mere sentiment of the living. To show our filial feeling." "Let's stop this horseplay," said Pilgrim. "Sha Monk can remain here to guard the grave, the horse, and the luggage. You and I will go and tear down the cave dwelling. When we capture the fiendish demon, we'll cut him into 10,000 pieces to avenge our master." "What elder brother says is perfectly right," said Sha Monk, still shedding tears. "The two of you should put your hearts to this. I'll stand guard here." Marvelous 8 Rules. He took off his black silk shirt and tightened his undergarment, before lifting his rake high to follow Pilgrim. Striding forward, the two of them, without waiting for further discussion, smashed down the stone door. "Give us back a living Tang monk," they thundered so loudly that the heavens shook. Those various fiends inside the cave, old and young, were so terrified that they all cast their blame on the vanguard as the old fiend asked him, "These monks have smashed their way inside our door. What shall we do?" The vanguard replied, "The ancients have put the matter well. Put your hand in the fish basket. And you can't avoid the stink. Never retreat once you start something. Let's call up the left and right commanders to lead our soldiers out to slaughter those monks." As he had no better plan than what he heard, the old fiend thereupon gave the order, "Little ones, be of one mind and pick up your best weapons. Follow me out to battle." With a roar, they stormed out of the cave. Our great sage and 8 Rules quickly retreated a few steps down to a level spot in the mountain. As they faced the various fiends, they shouted, "Who is the leader who has a name? Who is the fiend who has captured our master?" The various fiends pitched camp immediately and unfurled an embroidered floral banner. Grasping an iron club, the old fiend answered the call in a loud voice, saying, "Brazen monk, don't you recognize me? I am the great king of South Mountain, and I have held this place in my sway for several centuries. I've captured and devoured your Tang monk. What do you propose to do about that?" "You audacious hairy clod," scolded Pilgrim. "How many years have you lived that you dare assume the title, South Mountain? Old Lordly happens to be the patriarch of creation, but he still sits to the right of supreme purity. The Buddha Tathagata is the honored one who governs the world, and yet he still sits beneath the great rock. Kong the sage is the founder of Confucianism, but he assumes the mere title of master. And you, accursed beast, dare call yourself some great king of South Mountain, holding this place in your sway. Don't try to escape. Have a taste of your grandfather's rod. Stepping aside to dodge the blow, the monster spirit wielded his club to parry the iron rod and said, his eyes glowering, your features are those of an ape, and yet you dare insult me with so many words. What abilities do you have that you dare behave in such a rowdy manner in front of my door? You nameless cursed beast, said Pilgrim, laughing. Of course, you don't know anything of Old Monkey. Stand still, be brave, and listen to my recital. At Purvavidaha, my ancestral home. Through thousands of years conceived of heaven and earth. One stone egg immortal on Mount Flower Fruit. Did break and beget me, its progeny. By birth I thus was not of mortal stock. For sun and moon did this sage body forge. Myself, cultivated, was no small thing. Alert and keen, a great elixir source. Named the great sage, I lived among the clouds. And fought the stars, relying on my power. 10,000 gods could not approach me even. 'Twas easy to beat all planets of heaven. My fame was known in the world's every part. My wiles left a trail through the universe. By luck I've now embraced the Buddhist faith. To help an elder on his westward way. No one blocks the path I open on the mount. Though fiends worry when I build a bridge. I'll seize the forest tigers with my might. My hands will tame leopards before the cliff. The east's ripe fruit is coming to the west. Which monstrous deviate dares show his head? Since you, cursed beast, dare my master devour. Your life will surely perish within this hour. Alarmed and angered by these words, the fiend clenched his teeth, leaped forward, and struck out at Pilgrim with his iron club. Casually parrying the blow with his rod, Pilgrim wanted to talk some more with him, but our 8 rules could not hold back any longer. He lifted his rake and madly attacked the vanguard of the fiend, who met him head-on with the other monsters. This was some brawl on the mountain meadow, truly a marvelous battle. A priest from an eastern superior state went seeking true scriptures from the blissful west. The South Mount's great leopard belched wind and mist, and blocked the path, showing alone his might. With a clever plan and a wily scheme, he bagged in ignorance the great Tang monk. He met then the pilgrim of vast magic power, and 8 rules also of great renown. When fiends on the mountain meadow fought, dust and dirt flew up to bedim the sky. Little fiends shouted over there, madly raising their swords and spears. Divine monks bellowed over here, lifting up both rake and rod. The great sage was a hero without match. Wu Cheng'en was both stalwart and strong in years. The South Mountain old fiend, and his subject, the vanguard. All because of the Tang monk's one piece of flesh. Had quite forgotten the fear of life or death. These two turned hostile for their master's sake. Those two grew violent, desiring the Tang monk. Back and forth they battled for quite a while. Clashing and bumping, they fought to a draw. When the great sage Sun saw how ferocious those little fiends were, how they refused to step back even when they were repeatedly attacked, he resorted to his magic of body division. Ripping out a bunch of his own hairs, he chewed them to pieces before spitting them out, crying, "Change." At once they all assumed his appearance, each wielding a golden hooped rod, and began to push in from the front line of the battle. Those 100 or 200 little fiends found it difficult, of course, to look after both their front and their rear. Parrying the blows from the left, they could not attend to those coming from their right, and so all of them fled for their lives and retreated to the cave. As our pilgrim and 8 rules also fought their way out from the center of the battle, pity those monster spirits who did not know any better. Those running into the rake received 9 bleeding holes, while those hugged by the rod had their bones and flesh turned into put. That great king of South Mountain was so terrified that he fled for his life by mounting fog and wind. The vanguard, however, could not transform, and he was struck down by one blow of Pilgrim's rod. His original form emerged as an iron-backed gray wolf. Dragging him closer and flipping him over for another look, 8 rules said, "I wonder how many piglets and lambkins this fellow has stolen from people and eaten since his youth." With one shake of his body, Pilgrim retrieved his hair, saying, "Idiot, we must not delay. Let's chase down the old fiend quickly and ask him to pay for Master's life." When he turned his head and did not see those little pilgrims, 8 rules said, "The magic forms of Elder Brother have all disappeared?" "I've retrieved them," said Pilgrim. "Marvelous. Marvelous," said 8 rules, and the 2 of them returned in delight and triumph. We tell you now about that old fiend, who, when he fled back into his cave with his life, ordered the little fiends to move boulders and pole mud to the front door. Trembling all over, those fiends who managed to save their lives did indeed barricade the door, and dared not show their heads at all. When our pilgrim led 8 rules to chase up to the front door, their shouts brought no answer from within, and when 8 rules used his rake to strike at the barrier of mud, he could not budge it one whit. Realizing what had happened, Pilgrim said, 8 rules, don't waste your strength. They have barricaded the door. In that case, said 8 rules, how shall we avenge our master? Let's go back to the grave to see how Shaw Monk's doing, said Pilgrim. The 2 of them went back to the site, and found Shaw Monk still weeping. Ever more grief-stricken, 8 rules abandoned his rake and flung himself on the grave. As he pounded the dirt with his hands, he wailed, "O ill-fated master! O far-removed master! Where shall I ever get to see you again?" "Brother, please calm your sorrow," said Pilgrim. "If this monster spirit has his front door stopped up, there must be a back door for him to go in and out. The 2 of you remain here, and let me go back to have another look around." "O elder brother," said 8 rules, shedding tears. "Do be careful. If they manage to grab even you, it'll be difficult for us to weep. A sob for master and a sob for elder brother, we'll be all confused." "Don't worry," replied Pilgrim. "I'll be able to take care of myself." Dear great sage. Putting away his rod and tightening his skirt, he went past the mountain slope and immediately heard the sound of gurgling water. He saw, turning his head, that it came from a brook tumbling down from the peak. Then he discovered a little entrance on the other side of the brook, to the left of which there seemed to be a drainage sewer. It goes without saying, he thought to himself, that this must be the back door. If I present my face like this, some little fiends opening the door might recognize me. I'll change into a little water snake to get through, but wait. If the ghost of master knew that I'd changed into a snake, he would blame me because a serpentine creature would ill become a priest. Why not a little crab then? That's no good either, for master'll blame me for being a busybody priest. Finally he changed into a water rat and, with a whoosh, darted across the brook. Through the drainage sewer he crawled into the courtyard, and looked around. At the spot facing the sun were several little fiends hanging up, piece by piece, slabs of human flesh to be dried. "Oh my dear children," said Pilgrim to himself. "That has to be master's flesh. They couldn't finish all of him, and so they want to cure some strips for inclement weather. I would like to reveal my true form, rush up there, and slaughter them all with one stroke of my rod, but that'll only show that I have courage but little wisdom. I'll change again, and go inside to find the old fiend to see what's happening." He leaped out of the sewer, and with one shake of his body changed into a tiny, winged ant. Truly, his name's Dark Horse, one a small and feeble thing. But long cultivation has formed his wings. In idle moments by a bridge he'd flit, or roam beneath a bed to test his wit. He seals his hole, knowing when rain would come. Weighed down by dust he would ashes become. So airy and agile he can quickly soar. A few times, unknown, past the firewood door. Stretching his wings, without a shadow or sound, he flew directly into the center hall, where he found the old fiend sitting dejectedly. From behind him a small monster leaped out to say, "Great king, 10,000 delights attend you." "Where do these delights come from?" asked the old monster. The little monster said, "Just now I was doing a bit of intelligence work by the brook at our rear entrance, and I heard someone wailing. When I climbed up the peak to take a further look, I found that it was Ju 8 Rules, Pilgrim's son, and Sha monk who were mourning before a grave. They must have believed that human head was the Tang monk's and buried it. Now they are weeping beside the grave they dug." When Pilgrim heard this, he was secretly pleased, saying to himself, "If he could say this, my master must still be hidden here somewhere. He hasn't been devoured. Let me go search further to find out indeed whether master is dead or alive before I discuss the matter with these monsters." Dear great sage. Soaring high in the center hall, he looked this way and that and discovered to one side a little door, which was tightly shut. Crawling through a crack in the door, he found a large garden inside, from the center of which faint sounds of grief could be heard. When he flew deep into the garden, he came upon a clump of tall trees, beneath which 2 persons were tied. One of them was none other than the Tang monk. Pilgrim was so excited by the sight that he could not refrain from changing back into his original form and approaching to say, "Master." Recognizing him, the elder said, as his tears fell, "Wu Kong, so you've come. Save me quickly. Wu Kong. Wu Kong." "Stop calling my name, master," said Pilgrim. "There are still people up front, and I fear that they may get wind of this. As long as you're still alive, I can save you. That fiend told us that you had been devoured, using a false human head to deceive us. We have already fought bitterly with him. Please relax, master. Just bear with me a bit longer. When I've knocked down that monster spirit, I'll be able to come back here to free you." Reciting a spell, the great sage at once changed back into an ant to return to the center hall and alight on the main beam. A crowd of those little monsters who had not lost their lives were milling about noisily. From their midst one little monster suddenly dashed out to say, "Great king, when they see that the door is barricaded, and that they cannot break it open, they must also give up all hopes of recovering the Tang monk. After all, the false human head has been turned into a grave. They'll mourn for a day today, and for another tomorrow. By the day after tomorrow, they should have fulfilled the obligation of 3-day mourning, and they will leave. When we have made sure that they have scattered, we can then bring out the Tang monk, and have him finely diced. Pan-fry him with some star anise and Sichuan pepper, and we can enjoy a nice fragrant piece to lengthen our lives." "Stop talking like that," said another little monster, clapping his hands. "He'll taste much better if we steam him." "But not as economical as plain boiling," said another. "At least we can save some firewood that way." "He is, after all, a rare thing," another spoke up. "We really should cure him with salt, so that we may enjoy him much longer." When he heard this, perched on the beam, Pilgrim was filled with rage, saying to himself, "What sort of enmity do you have against my master that you should make such elaborate plans to devour him?" Pulling out a bunch of his own hairs and chewing them to pieces, he spat them out lightly and recited in silence a magic spell. The hairs all changed into sleep-inducing insects, which he threw onto the faces of the monsters. As the insects crawled into their noses one by one, the little monsters gradually dropped off until, in no time at all, they had all fallen fast asleep. Only the old monster, however, remained restless as he continued to scratch his head and rub his face with both hands. He was sneezing repeatedly so that he kept pinching his nose. "Could it be that he has found out something?" said Pilgrim. "Let's give him a double-wick lamp." Pulling off another piece of hair, he fashioned another creature like the ones before and threw it onto his face. Now he had 2 insects, one entering through his left nostril and the other through his right. Struggling up for a moment, the old monster stretched and yawned a couple of times, and then he too fell into a snoring slumber. Delighted, Pilgrim leaped down and changed back into his original form. Taking out his rod from his ear, he waved it once and it attained the thickness of a duck egg. With a loud clang he smashed the side door to pieces and ran into the rear garden, shouting, "Master! Disciple, untie me quickly," said the elder, "for I'm about to be ruined." "Don't hurry, Master," Pilgrim said. "Let me slay the monster spirit first before I come rescue you." He turned and dashed back into the center hall. As he was about to strike with upraised rod, he stopped and said, "No good. Let me untie Master first before I strike at him." He rushed back into the garden, only to think to himself, "I'll slay him first before the rescue." He went back and forth like this 2 or 3 times before finally dancing his way into the garden. This sight of him gave the elder some delight even in his sorrow. "Monkey," he said, "it must be that you are overjoyed by the sight of my being still alive, and that is why you are dancing in this manner." Pilgrim then walked up to him to untie his ropes. As he led his master away, they heard the person tied to another tree facing them call out, "Venerable Father, please exercise your great mercy and save my life too." Standing still, the elder said, "Wu Cheng'en, please untie that person also." "Who is he?" asked Pilgrim. "He's a woodcutter," replied the elder, "who had been captured a day before I was seized. He told me that he has an aged mother, whom he thinks of constantly. He's a most filial person, and we might as well rescue him too." Pilgrim agreed and untied the man's ropes also. They went out through the rear entrance together, and ascended the cliff to cross the swift-flowing brook. "Worthy disciple," said the elder, "I thank you for saving his life and mine." "Wu Cheng'en and Wu Cheng'en, where are they?" "The 2 of them are mourning you," replied Pilgrim. "You may call out to them now." And the elder cried out in a loud voice, "8 rules! 8 rules!" As he had been weeping till he was half-dazed, our idiot wiped his snout and eyes and said, "Sha monk, Master must have come home to reveal his soul. Isn't it he who's calling us from somewhere?" Rushing forward, Pilgrim shouted, coolly, "Who's revealing his soul? Isn't this Master who has returned?" When Sha monk lifted his head and saw them, he fell to his knees and said, "Master, how you must have suffered. How did elder brother manage to rescue you?" Whereupon Pilgrim gave a thorough account of what had taken place. When he heard this, 8 rules grew so infuriated that he raised his rake, clenched his teeth, and hacked away the grave mound. Digging out the head, he pounded it to pieces. "Why did you beat it up?" asked the Tang monk. "Oh Master," said 8 rules. "I don't know which family this outcast belongs to, but he has caused me to weep for him for a long time." "You should thank him instead for saving my life," said the Tang monk. "When you brothers fought your way to their door and demanded my return, the monsters used him as a substitute to ward you off. If it hadn't been for him, I would have been killed. You should have him buried, simply as an expression of our priestly gratitude." When he heard these words of the elder, our idiot indeed packed up the mess of flesh and bones and buried it again by digging another grave. With a chuckle Pilgrim said, "Master, please sit here for a moment, and let me go and finish them off." He leaped down from the cliff and crossed the brook to return to the cave. Taking into the center hall the ropes that had been used to tie the Tang monk and the woodcutter, he found the old monster still sleeping. After having hog-tied him, Pilgrim used his golden hooped rod to lift the bundle up and carried it on his shoulder to leave by the rear entrance. When 8 rules caught sight of them from a distance, he said, "Elder brother just loves this lopsided business. Wouldn't it be better if he had found another monster to give him a balanced load?" Pilgrim drew near and dropped down the old monster, and 8 rules was about to strike with his rake. "Wait a moment," said Pilgrim. "We haven't seized the little monsters in the cave yet." "Oh elder brother," said 8 rules, "lead me to them so I can hit them." "Hitting them is such a waste of energy," said Pilgrim. "It's better to find some firewood and finish them off that way." On hearing this, the woodcutter immediately led 8 rules to the eastern valley to find some broken bamboos, leafless pines, hollow willows, snapped-off vines, yellow artemisia, old reeds, rushes, and parched mulberry. After they had hauled bundles of these into the rear entrance, Pilgrim lit a fire while 8 Rules fanned up a breeze with his ears. As he leaped out of the cave, our great sage shook his body once to retrieve his hairs. By the time those little monsters awoke, both smoke and fire were pouring out. Alas! Not even half a monster managed to escape, for the cave dwelling was completely burned out. When the disciples returned to their master, the elder saw that the old monster was stirring, and he called out, "Disciples, the monster spirit is awake." Going forward, 8 Rules slew the old fiend with one blow of his rake. Its original form appeared to be that of a spotted leopard. "This sort of spotted leopard," said Pilgrim, "can even devour a tiger. Now it has managed to assume human form. Putting it to death will prevent it from causing any further trouble." The elder thanked them over and over again before climbing once more into the saddle. "Venerable Father," said the woodcutter, "toward the southwest not far from here is my humble abode. I would like to invite you there to meet my mother, so that she may bow to thank you all for saving my life. Then we will escort you to the main road." Delighted, the elder dismounted and headed southwest with the woodcutter and the 3 disciples. After a short distance they came upon a path of flagstones moss-lined and wood gates wisteria entwined. On 4 sides are mountains lambent and trees filled with birdsong strident. Pines and bamboos join in thick green. Profusive rare blossoms are seen. Deep in the clouds and out of the way is a bamboo-fenced thatched hut to stay. From a long way away they caught sight of an old woman, leaning on the wooden gate, and weeping bitterly, crying out for her son all the while. When the woodcutter saw his own mother, he abandoned the elder, and rushed up to the wooden gate. As he went to his knees, he cried, "Mother, your son's here." Embracing him, the old woman said, "Oh my child. When you did not return home these last few days, I supposed that you were seized by the mountain lord and killed, and the very thought of it gave me unbearable pain. If you weren't harmed, why did you wait till today before returning? Where are your ropes, your pole, and your axe?" The woodcutter kowtowed before replying, "Mother, your son indeed was taken away by the mountain lord and tied to a tree. It would have been truly difficult to preserve my life if it hadn't been for these several venerable fathers. That one happens to be an arhat sent by the Tang court of the land of the east to go seek scriptures in the western heaven. He too was captured by the mountain lord and bound to a tree. His 3 disciples, however, possess vast magic powers. They succeeded in slaying the mountain lord, who turned out to be the spirit of a spotted leopard. Then they burned to death a great number of the little monsters. When they freed and rescued that old venerable father, they rescued your child as well. Their kindness to me is high as heaven and thick as earth. If it hadn't been for them, your child would certainly have perished. Now the mountain is quite safe, and even if your child journeys through the night, there'll be no danger." When the old woman heard these words, she bowed with each step she took to receive the elder and the 3 disciples into her thatched cottage. After they were seated, mother and son kowtowed repeatedly to thank them, before rushing into the kitchen to prepare a vegetarian meal. "Brother woodcutter," said 8 Rules, "I realize that yours is a humble livelihood. You may feed us a simple meal, but please don't go to the trouble of making any elaborate preparation." "To tell you the truth, venerable father," replied the woodcutter, "ours indeed is a lowly abode in the mountains. There are no large black mushrooms, but on mushrooms, Szechuan peppers, or star anise. We have only a few items of wild vegetation to present to you all as a mere token of our gratitude." "Sorry to have caused you such inconvenience," said 8 Rules, chuckling. "Just make it snappy, for we're getting awfully hungry." "In a moment." "In a moment," said the woodcutter. Indeed, in a moment the tables and chairs were spread out and wiped clean, and several dishes of wild vegetation were brought out. What you see too are the yellow cabbage lightly blanched, and white beans pickled and minced, water polygonum and purslane, shepherd's purse and wild goose intestine. 3. The swallow not coming 4 both fragrant and tender. Bean sprouts with small buds both crisp and green. Horse blue 5 roots cooked till soft. Dog footprints 6 plainly toasted. Cat sears 7. And by 8 dropped in the wilds. The ashenstock, 9 cooked very soft, is esculent. The scissors handle 10. And cow's pool profit, 11. The hollow snail 12 upturned and filled, the broom-like shepherd's purse. The broken rice chi, 13. The wokeki 14. These few items are both fragrant and smooth. Niaoying 15 flowers fried in oil. And most praiseworthy water chestnuts. Rushes stems and tender watercress. For aqueous plants truly rich and pure. The wheat-wearing lady 16. Is coy and good. The torn-worn cassock 17. No need to wear it. Below the bitter hemp are bamboo props. The little bird's cotton coat 18. And the monkey's footprints 19. Are so oily when fried that you have to eat them. The slanted how, the green how, and the mother-hugging how 20. Some tiny moths have flown atop the flat buckwheat. To bear goat ears 21. And gookie 22 roots. You add but black blue 23, and there's no need for oil. These wild vegetations and a meal of rice. The woodman truly offers as gifts of thanks. After master and disciples had eaten their fill, they at once made preparation to leave. Not daring to detain them for long, the woodcutter asked his mother to come out to thank and bow to their visitors once more while he kowtowed repeatedly. Having tidied his clothes, the woodcutter then took up a staff made from the trunk of a date tree to escort the pilgrims out the door. While Monk led the horse, 8 rules toted the luggage, and Pilgrim followed closely to one side. The elder, riding the horse, folded his hands before his chest and said, "Brother Woodcutter, please lead the way. We shall take proper leave of you when we reach the main road." They then descended from the heights and headed for the slope, following the turns of the brook. Musing as he rode, the elder said, "O disciples, since leaving my Lord to go to the west, I've walked the path of an unending quest. In mountains and streams disasters await. My life has been the fiends and monsters' bait. Tripitaka's the sole thought on my mind. The ninefold heavens all I hope to find. When will I from such toil my respite earn? And, merit done, to the Tang court return?" On hearing this, the woodcutter said, "Venerable father, please cast aside your worries. In less than 1,000 miles on this main road to the west will be the kingdom of India, the home of ultimate bliss." When he heard this, the elder at once dismounted and said, "We've caused you inconvenience to come this far. If that is the main road before us, let me urge you to return to your house, brother woodcutter, and do thank your honored mother for us for that sumptuous vegetarian repast. This humble cleric has few tokens of gratitude to offer except the promise of reciting scriptures morning and evening on your behalf, so that both of you, mother and son, will be blessed with peace and long life of 100 years. The woodcutter respectfully agreed and walked back, while master and disciples headed straight for the west. Truly, the fiend subdued, they leave their hard ordeal. The kindness received, they journey with zeal. We do not know how many more days it will take them to reach the western heaven. Let's listen to the explanation in the next chapter. You are listening to PastThink.com audiobook. Please like and subscribe, thank you.